Right in the middle of Texas, there's a region most people drive through without realizing they're in it. The roads narrow, the ground turns to limestone, and suddenly you're somewhere that doesn't look or feel like the rest of the state. Towns with German names, rivers that run cold even in August, and dance halls that have been open every Saturday night for almost 200 years. The people who built these towns came over from Germany in the 1800s, looking for land nobody else wanted. They found it, cut their houses out of the hills, started farms on rock that wasn't supposed to grow anything, and stayed. The names on the mailboxes haven't changed since. Not every town up here lasted, though. One was finished by a bad outbreak of typhoid and a single fire. Another lived and died with a railroad that no longer runs. Their buildings are still standing on roads that barely show up on a map. And yet the people who stayed don't talk about any of it. A Spanish mission at the southern edge of these hills became the site of a siege that changed the course of a country. There's a place in the brush that hides a sight most people never get to see in their lives. And there's water in this country that doesn't behave the way water is supposed to. This is the Texas Hill Country, and I can't figure out why so few people talk about it. Maybe by the end, you will. Central Texas holds one of the oldest exposed rock formations on Earth, so unusual that scientists still study it to understand how the crust behaves under pressure. This is the Edwards Plateau, and at its centre rises Enchanted Rock, a massive pink granite dome that bulges from the ground like a sleeping giant, spanning more than entire city blocks. On quiet nights, the rock groans and cracks as it cools after a hot day. And for centuries, the Tonkawa believed those sounds were spirits walking across the stone. At the top, the dome forms vernal pools, shallow rainwater in rock hollows that sustain fairy shrimp and other tiny life found nowhere nearby. Just beyond the base, where the plateau opens into oak and cedar, a non-native deer moves through the brush, the axis deer, a spotted antlered animal from far away. Originally from India and Sri Lanka, it was brought to Texas ranches for sport hunting. And then, as deer tend to do, it simply walked off and never came back. Unlike native white-tailed deer that lose their spots as fawns, axis deer keep their bright white spots for life, which makes them look permanently young. The bucks don't follow a fixed mating season. They can go into rut at almost any time of year, therefore somewhere on the Edwards Plateau, a male is always showing off. That unpredictable breeding cycle gives them a serious population advantage, and their numbers here have grown so large that they now outnumber native deer in the area. They graze grass like cattle and browse shrubs like deer, competing directly with livestock and native wildlife. When a predator approaches, it lets out a loud, bark-like alarm call that sounds nothing like what you'd expect from a deer. It's more like a dog that stumbled into the wrong costume. Their ability to live on tough, dry scrub has made wildlife managers genuinely concerned, since no natural population control fully keeps them in check across the plateau. Today it roams freely across land, once fought over and bled for. Just down the road, stone fort ruins mark how dangerous it once was to claim this territory. Presidio de San Sabah is a Spanish fort poorly placed and timed. It was attacked and burned within a year, leaving soldiers trapped inside, forced to hold their ground. What makes it stranger is that the Spanish actually rebuilt it. Same location, same threat, as if the first lesson wasn't quite clear enough. Some say you can still hear distant drums near the ruins on quiet nights, likely just wind moving through the cedar breaks, though no one's in a rush to prove it. Archaeologists digging at the site have pulled up Spanish military equipment, trade goods and Comanche arrowheads, all mixed in the same soil. Not far from where soldiers once fought over dry, unforgiving ground, the land quietly does something surprising. It fills a pool with cold, clear water and frames it with a waterfall. Hamilton Pool formed when the dome of an underground river collapsed, leaving a natural grotto with a near-perfect shape carved by time and water. The overhang juts out so far it nearly shades the pool entirely, and with stalactites still forming above, the grotto looks like a cave that forgot to close its roof. Cypress trees and maidenhair ferns crowd the walls of the grotto, thriving in the cool, damp air trapped inside. Plants that normally need far more rainfall than central Texas ever gets. The pool has been closed multiple times after floods, and heavy visitation pushed the fragile system past its limits, forcing repeated shutdowns for recovery. Local swimmers report a strange cold current rising from the bottom, fed by underground springs connected to the region's underground water table, constantly feeding the pool from below. Perched on the rocky edges above the waterfall, a small bird with a rosy red face watches on. The house finch, now at home across nearly all of North America. Once confined to the pet trade on the East Coast, the species escaped into the wild after illegal sellers released birds to avoid prosecution, allowing it to spread rapidly across the continent. Though small enough to fit in a child's palm, they survive in cities, suburbs, and remote areas alike through sheer adaptability. At Hamilton Pool, they cluster along the moist grotto walls, where constant plant growth and insect activity provide resources rare in the surrounding dry scrubland. The male's red coloration comes not from genetics alone, but from diet. Berries and fruits supply the pigments, meaning a duller face often signals a poorer foraging history. Females favour brighter red males, so feeding habits shape reproductive success, while their songs remain bright and varied, each one distinct. House finches can also carry a contagious eye disease that spreads easily in dense groups, leading infected individuals to withdraw from the flock as their condition worsens. Where the trees thicken and the rock outcrops rise, an animal moves through the hill country at night that most people don't expect to find here. The North American porcupine is a slow, mostly unbothered animal, covered in thousands of quills, each tipped with barbs that dig deeper with every movement. Here's the thing, almost everyone gets it wrong. Porcupines cannot throw their quills. Not a single one has ever been launched through the air, and yet the myth refuses to die. What actually happens is far more unsettling. The quills detach on contact, so a predator is already dealing with a buried quill before it even fully registers what just touched it. Across the rocky cedar terrain, porcupines climb trees with surprising ease, feeding on inner bark, buds and leaves that most other animals pass right by. They crave salt so intensely, they will chew through wooden axe handles, leather saddles, canoe paddles and old boots. Anything that ever soaked up sweat from a human hand is fair game. From the plateau's edge, the Pedernales River cuts east through one of the most unusual stretches of rock in central Texas. At Pedernales Falls, the river doesn't drop over a single dramatic cliff. It spills across wide, tilted slabs of limestone in a series of staggered steps. Those limestone layers tilt because the rock shelf was pushed and folded long ago, so the falls record the earth slowly shifting beneath your feet. The river looks calm, but sudden upstream storms can trigger flash floods that reshape the canyon, shifting giant boulders, carving new channels, and even changing the falls themselves. But in the slow-moving pools along the Pedernales, catfish hold their position on the river bottom, barely moving. Relying almost entirely on smell and taste, it uses long whisker-like barbels to read the water around it, sensing things that have no colour, no shape, and no sound. Its entire body acts like one giant tasting organ, with taste buds not just in its mouth, but across its skin, letting it taste the water it swims through before anything reaches its face. Relying on extreme patience, it sits motionless on the riverbed for hours, waiting for prey to drift within reach, using almost no energy and rarely missing. For Texas anglers, catfish have been a tradition since before the state had paved roads, pursued by hook, line, and in some parts of the hill country, by bare hands alone. Still near the river pools, a flash of solid red moves through the canopy overhead. Summer tanager is the only entirely red bird in North America. No black, no crest, just red. All of it, top to bottom. And what it eats makes it even more interesting. Bees and wasps on purpose, as a regular meal. Before swallowing one, it rubs the stinger off against a branch to kill the venom first. A trick so deliberate, it looks less like instinct, and more like something it actually taught itself. Here, it doesn't stop at catching adults in flight. It finds active wasp nests, picks off the guards, then raids the nest for the larvae inside, The female is mustard yellow, so a mated pair in the same tree looks like two birds from completely different species that somehow ended up sharing an address. Canyon Lake isn't far, and when the hill country opens up to that much clear blue water, it's a completely different world. It isn't a natural lake. It was created by damming the Guadalupe River, flooding a valley once shaped by ranching, with old property lines still faintly visible on maps beneath the surface. Fed by underground springs filtered through limestone, the water stays unusually clear, a still reservoir with a near pristine, almost ocean-like transparency. That clarity comes with a catch. Low nutrient levels keep algae from forming, but also leave the underwater environment stripped of much visible life and movement. In heavy flood years, rising water can overtake boat ramps, roads and campsites within hours, so locals track conditions upstream on the Guadalupe the same way others watch storm forecasts. Divers exploring the base of the limestone walls have reached the original riverbed far below, the old Guadalupe still intact, just sealed under decades of quiet water. On still mornings, residents say fence posts and stone foundations appear through the surface haze, the traces of a place that no longer exists above water. At Canyon Lake, calm water now covers what once carved through solid rock, exposing buried layers and leaving a gorge that looks like the earth split open and then sealed shut again. The gorge didn't exist until a record flood overwhelmed the spillway, carving a canyon through solid limestone in just days. What the flood exposed stopped geologists cold. Fossilised sea creatures and shells pressed into the rock walls, proof that this part of Texas was once the floor of a shallow inland sea. Access is still restricted to guided tours only, one of the few places in Texas you can't just walk into, which somehow makes it even more interesting. People report fossil beds so packed with marine impressions that the walls look less like rock and more like somewhere the ocean left everything behind in a hurry. Above the gorge, riding the thermals that rise off the warm limestone walls, a red-tailed hawk circles in wide, patient arcs. From above, it hardly flaps at all. Warm updrafts do the work, letting it drift across long distances while conserving energy. Its vision is sharp enough to pick out a mouse in the grass below, like reading a newspaper from a 10-story building. This land of exposed limestone and open scrub creates near-perfect conditions, wide sight lines, little cover for prey, and steady updrafts that carry it effortlessly for long distances. They perch for hours on fence posts, dead branches, and utility poles along the shoreline, using height like a lifeguard tower, still and scanning everything below. Their red tail only develops in adulthood. Younger birds carry a brown banded tail that looks entirely different. A ridge above each eye acts like a built-in sun visor, reducing glare across bright rock and open water during the hunt. One can rotate its head nearly all the way around, allowing it to track movement behind it without shifting its body. That iconic screech in movies isn't an eagle, it's a red-tailed hawk. Filmmakers use it because the bald eagle's real call is too small and undramatic for the screen. Further west, where the hill country gives way to harder, flatter ground, the ruins of Fort McKavett still stand near the San Saba River. It was built at the edge of what the government considered the manageable world, a deliberate line in the dirt between settled Texas and Comanche and Apache territory. What's unusual is how much survived. Stone barracks, a hospital, and officer quarters still stand, making it feel less like a ruin and more like a town that just stopped one day. The Buffalo Soldiers, Black Infantry and Cavalry regiments assigned here after the Civil War turned this fort into one of the most effective military posts on the entire Texas frontier. The fort was abandoned once, quietly reoccupied by settlers who moved right into the stone buildings, then reclaimed by the army years later. Not far from the fort, below the surface of the hill country limestone, a different kind of history was happening at Longhorn Cavern State Park. This cave wasn't shaped by slow drips. An underground river forced its way through solid rock, leaving behind smooth, sculpted walls that feel almost man-made. Then, people moved in. Native Americans sheltered here long before Europeans arrived. Fire-blackened ceilings, worn stone, and forgotten tools still mark their presence. Later, Confederate soldiers used the cool to store gunpowder. Then outlaws hid in the darkness, until someone turned it into an underground dance hall to escape the Texas heat. Moving back above ground, where the cave country gives way to cedar and live oak, the grey fox operates mostly at night and mostly unseen. Unlike most foxes, it can climb trees with ease, gripping bark with semi-retractable claws and pulling itself upward to escape coyotes, rest on branches, or raid bird nests. In this rocky, cedar-choked terrain, that ability becomes crucial. When the ground offers little cover and escape routes are short, height becomes an advantage. Rather than chasing speed, it survives through awareness, reading every twist of brush and stone and slipping through it in near-total darkness. Its diet shifts with the seasons: rabbits, insects, berries, birds, even fruit, a flexible menu shaped entirely by whatever the land produces. Grey foxes often rest in small family groups, tucked close together for warmth, a quiet contrast to the hard, thorny world they move through at night. They rarely build from scratch, usually taking over abandoned armadillo or skunk burrows, making quick adjustments and settling in. While the fox keeps close to the ground and the shadows, something else works the space far above, tilting on wide wings, rocking slightly side to side, reading the air below. turkey vulture is a bird that finds food not by sight, but by smell, detecting decaying animals hidden beneath dense forest canopy from miles away. Up close, the adult's head is bare, wrinkled and bright red, a design that helps reduce bacteria buildup while feeding inside carcasses. Juveniles look entirely different. Their heads are dark grey, a temporary disguise that disappears only after they mature into full adults. At night they gather in groups on dead trees, then at sunrise spread their wings wide in a heraldic pose, absorbing early sunlight to warm their bodies after a low-energy night. That same stance can look almost ritualistic in the morning light, dark wings held open, motionless. But it is simply a multi-purpose routine for drying feathers and preparing for flight. They also regulate heat in an unusual way, urinating on their legs so evaporation cools them efficiently under the open sun. When food is scarce, they don't specialise narrowly. They can extend their diet to softer organic matter like fruit, and in extreme cases other available scraps, simply to survive. West of the hill country's river country, a town sits on the main street of Gillespie County that has no business looking the way it does. Fredericksburg was founded in the 1840s by German immigrants brought over by a land company that bought a huge tract of Texas, then collapsed almost immediately after. Left in Comanche territory with no support or supplies, they did what came naturally, built a town, laid it out in German style, and got to work. The limestone homes they constructed are still standing today, built so solidly that the hill country climate has had nearly 2 centuries to try and fail to wear them down. Farm families too far to reach Sunday church, in a day built simple Sunday houses in town, a bedroom, fireplace, and place to sleep between Saturday arrival and Sunday service. Not far from town, the pink granite dome of Enchanted rock rises from the scrub, the same formation the Tonkawa heard groan at night, and early explorers struggled to understand. Today, it stands in view of Fredericksburg's outskirts, a landmark the town quietly claimed without fanfare. Going southeast near the town of Wimberley, a spring pushes cold, clear water up through a circular opening in a creek bed. This is Jacob's Well. From the surface, it looks like a flawless swimming hole, so clear you can see straight down, and so cold it can take your breath away on a Texas afternoon. But beneath the calm surface, the geology drops straight down into narrowing, submerged passages that extend far beyond what's been fully explored. Deeper inside, one route appears to continue outward, but instead turns into a false exit, a deceptive passage that mimics an escape route, but leads further into the system instead. The spring is artesian, driven by natural pressure from the hill country's underground aquifer, bringing water that has travelled long distances beneath limestone before surfacing here. In the oak and juniper trees surrounding the spring, a small, quick bird moves through the branches in short bursts without stopping, the Carolina chickadee. For something that weighs less than a handful of coins, it is remarkably intelligent for its size. It caches food in hundreds of hidden locations and can return to them days or even weeks later with remarkable accuracy. In these dense oaks and year-round juniper cover, that behaviour turns the area into a living pantry, with food stores scattered across an entire stretch of woodland. Its chickadee call acts as a real-time alarm system, with more D notes signalling greater danger so other birds can respond appropriately. Even species that do not share the same calls are able to interpret the warning and react to it. South of the hill country, where the land flattens into the city of San Antonio, a limestone facade sits in the middle of a downtown plaza surrounded by hotels and tourist traffic. The Alamo began as a Spanish mission turned fortified outpost, where a small garrison held out for nearly 2 weeks against a much larger Mexican army before the walls fell. The famous curved facade wasn't original. It was added by the US Army decades after the battle, reshaping the structure into the version most people recognise today. Across its history, the site has served many roles, from Native American land to mission grounds, from battlefield to military depot, each era leaving a different imprint on the same footprint. In the western reaches of the country, the ground drops away without warning into a vertical shaft wide enough to swallow a building whole. The Devil's Sinkhole formed when the roof of an underground chamber collapsed, exposing a massive limestone void that opens directly to the surface. At the rim, it appears as a near-perfect vertical cut into the earth, a sheer opening that plunges into darkness with no visible floor. Early settlers gave it its name after hearing a low roaring sound rising from below at dusk, unable to explain it and defaulting to something supernatural. In reality, the noise comes from millions of Mexican free-tailed bats, one of North America's largest colonies, launching from the shaft in a dense, spiralling column that can stretch for hours. Each evening they pour out, and each morning they return, moving through the same hidden route in the rock with clockwork precision. Not far away, Sisterdale mirrors that rhythm more quietly, once full of activity and ideas, now largely reduced to stillness. Political refugees who had fled Europe after the revolutions of 1848 failed, men with law degrees and philosophy training and strong opinions about how a society should be organised. They came here and tried to build something close to a utopia, or at least a place where educated people could think and argue in peace. The isolation was too complete, the land too unforgiving, and the Civil War fractured the community in ways it never recovered from. What remains today is a stone building or two, a small winery, and a dance hall that still opens on weekends. Locals say the old structures hold a particular kind of quiet. Not abandoned exactly, but waiting, as if the place hasn't fully accepted that the argument is over. From here, the trail leads to Lost Maples State Natural Area, steep limestone canyons and rare maples that turn the region into something almost unrecognizable each fall. The Uvalde bigtooth maples here are biological survivors from a cooler, wetter Texas, persisting in isolated canyon pockets where conditions remain just stable enough for them to endure. In autumn, they shift into vivid reds and orange tones against a backdrop that stays brown and dry for months. A contrast so sharp, people travel hours to see it. That display isn't guaranteed. It depends on temperature and rain, so the park posts weekly updates locals follow like major events. The canyon walls are steep enough to trap cooler air below, creating sheltered microclimates that allow unusual combinations of plants and wildlife to persist. A single flash flood can reshape the canyon floor overnight. Hikers have returned to find creek beds redirected, boulders displaced, and trees stripped clean. The canyons here were carved by force. Fort Martin Scott was too, just a different kind, raised by soldiers at the edge of a frontier that kept pushing back. It was the first US Army post established in Texas after the Mexican-American War, placed where German settler land gave way to contested Comanche territory. Instead of walls or stockades, it was built as an open arrangement of buildings around a parade ground, reflecting its role as a presence rather than a fortress. Rather than conflict, daily life often revolved around exchange. The Comanche regularly traded with soldiers, turning the post into an unexpected frontier marketplace. Within a decade, it was abandoned as military focus shifted farther west, and settlers moved in soon after, repurposing the site without ceremony as ordinary property. Archaeologists later found military gear, trade goods, and household items layered together in the soil, evidence of rapid, overlapping occupation by different groups over time. From the fort ruins, the water takes over, the Guadalupe River, running clear over limestone banks, connecting everything this region ever built, fought over, or left behind. It runs cold even at the peak of summer, fed by underground springs that hold its temperature steady, regardless of what the Texas heat is doing above ground. That reputation comes with a warning. On calm days it's blue-green, shallow, and easy to wade, but when a storm breaks upstream, it becomes a fast, opaque, dangerous wall of water. The limestone banks are packed with fossils from an inland sea that once covered this entire region. Local river guides have a saying: "The Guadalupe shows you exactly who you are. Patient people float it without incident for decades, and those who underestimate it usually only do so once." Along shaded banks where cedar and oak lean over the water, a yellow-crowned night heron stands motionless on a low branch, barely visible, and waiting for the current to bring its next meal. It is active mainly at dusk and night, spending daylight hours tucked in heavy cover where it can sit undetected even within a few steps of passing trails. When it does move, it does so with deliberate precision, each step placed slowly, almost carefully tested before weight is shifted forward. On a perch, it folds into a compact, hunched shape, neck drawn tight against its body, reducing its outline until it nearly disappears into the branches around it. Unlike most herons that hunt fish, this one specialises almost entirely in crabs and crayfish, a diet so specific its skull, beak and neck are built for cracking shells rather than spearing soft prey. The yellow crown it's named for is rarely visible outside breeding season, a faint stripe that only briefly appears when the bird is at its most exposed. Inland from the river, on the grounds of the Hill Country Arts Foundation in Ingram, something stands in a field that requires a moment to process. Stonehenge 2 is a near full-scale replica of England's prehistoric monument, built not by an early civilization, but by a Texas rancher who saw a stone on a neighbour's property and decided to finish the job. The stones aren't stone at all, hollow steel frames covered in plaster and concrete, which makes the whole thing considerably lighter than the original and somehow funnier. It even aligns with the sunrise on the summer solstice, because the builder checked the geometry and decided that detail mattered enough to include. Locals use it for weddings, graduation photos, and community events without a trace of irony. A good landmark is a good landmark, regardless of how it got there. Down a narrow road off the highway, past a hand-painted sign that takes some finding, a community of 3 permanent residents has become one of the most visited destinations in the area. Luckenbach has a general store, post office and dance hall from the 1800s, all still running, but almost no residents, making it less a town and more a preserved idea of one. The whole settlement was bought in the 1970s for a famously small sum and reopened as a music venue. What seemed strange at the time now feels hard to argue with. Its dance hall runs without a schedule. Musicians arrive when they do, chairs are pulled under the oaks, and the night builds itself from conversation, music, and cold drinks. A famous country song put Luckenbach on the map, and it responded by changing nothing. No expansion, no gift shops, just the same 3 buildings and trees. The post office still runs on its own zip code, with a population that could fit in a single pickup truck, one of the smallest active postal addresses in the state. Then, the next stop goes underground. The Caverns of Sonora hold crystal formations so intricate that even geologists run out of words for them. Most caves grow their formations straight down or straight up, stalactites from the ceiling, stalagmites from the floor. But it didn't get that memo. . The walls here are covered in helictites, formations that grow sideways, upward, in spirals, at impossible angles, in complete defiance of gravity, as if the cave decided the normal rules didn't apply. It maintains a constant temperature, and the humidity sits so close to 100% that a single tour group breathing inside can measurably alter the air. From underground wonder to open-air ghost story, Pontotoc once had all the makings of a proper town, until disease, fire and silence moved in, and most everything else moved out. Founded in the 1850s, Pontotoc grew quickly. A school, a post office, stores, families, the kind of place that looked, for a moment, like it was going to matter. Then typhoid arrived, and it didn't leave quietly. Outbreaks moved through the population repeatedly, and families who could leave did, taking the town's momentum with them. Fire took care of what disease had left behind, burning through the remaining businesses until the commercial core that once gave Pontotoc its identity was gone. What the fires and outbreaks didn't finish, economics did. When nearby towns got the railroad and Pontotoc didn't, the last practical reason to stay evaporated almost overnight. Pontotoc ran out of reasons to stay. Garner State Park has the opposite problem. People show up, feel the Frio River, and immediately start planning when they are coming back. Set against rising limestone bluffs and rolling terrain, the view stretches far enough to make it easy to forget you're still in Texas. Reservations fill months in advance, often the moment booking opens, a level of demand that reflects how quickly visitors want to return. A long-running summer tradition keeps the energy going. Outdoor jukebox dances where families gather on a concrete slab and strangers end up dancing together. Cypress and oak crowd the slopes, and at times deer move through camp so calmly and close that first-time visitors stop mid-sentence just to watch them pass. All of it, the hills, bluffs and shade, feeds into the same cold current, the Frio River, carrying the park's promise long after the land falls away. Named Frio, the Spanish word for cold, it lives up to its name year-round, fed by underground springs that keep its temperature steady, regardless of weather above. Flash floods can arrive without warning. Locals know this, visitors often don't, with water levels rising several feet, in under an hour from distant storms, even under clear skies. On busy summer weekends, that same river becomes something entirely different. A slow, drifting congestion of tubes and kayaks, moving shoulder to shoulder through the current. Along the limestone banks, small fossils are scattered in the rock, traces of a long-vanished seabed that once covered this part of Texas long before any settlements existed. Early settlers sometimes misjudged its clarity, stepping in too confidently and discovering too late how quickly the depth changes beneath the surface. Not far from the river road, a near ghost town called Bankersmith marks the kind of ending that railroad towns across Texas know well. It was built entirely around the railroad. The tracks brought people, commerce, and purpose, and when the service was cut, all three left at roughly the same speed. A handful of buildings survived and were quietly restored over the years, not through official preservation, but by private individuals who simply didn't want them to disappear. The property eventually became entirely privately owned, so Bankersmith is now less a town and more a single large holding that just looks like one. It now even has an event space, hosting weddings and gatherings, where a functioning community once stood. From a place preserved by stubbornness, the road leads to Inks Lake State Park, where pink granite rises, small waterfalls cut through rock, and the lake stays calm year-round. The park is built from some of Texas's oldest exposed rock, granite pushed up from below ground and slowly reshaped into broad, weather-worn slabs over immense time. Unlike many lakes that rise and fall with weather, Inks Lake stays steady year-round, held by a Colorado River dam, while its small size keeps crowds light and campsites close to the water. After rain, water briefly gathers between the granite slabs, forming short-lived waterfalls that rush through narrow channels before fading back into stillness within hours. On the calm lake, the American coot drifts in loose groups, so unhurried they look less like wild birds and more like they've claimed the water. They are the only rails that live in groups. While most of their relatives stay solitary, they form open water flocks called fleets. Despite looking like a duck at first glance, the coot isn't one. It belongs to the rail family, which has long led to confusion among casual observers. It moves through water without webbed feet, instead using lobed toes that spread on the push and fold on the return, turning each stroke into a controlled, almost mechanical motion. On land, those same feet make it awkward and unsteady, a contrast the bird seems entirely unconcerned with. Coots eat almost anything the water provides. Algae, plants, seeds, insects, snails, crayfish, and even the eggs of other birds when the opportunity appears. Early in life, chicks are fed a protein-heavy diet of insects and small aquatic prey before gradually shifting toward plant matter as they mature. Newly hatched chicks carry bright orange-red head feathers that fade within weeks, a short-lived visual cue that appears to stimulate feeding responses in adults. For a bird that spends most of its life floating, it is unexpectedly aggressive, chasing, pecking, and fighting over food and space with surprising intensity. That intensity extends into parenting. When resources are limited, adults prioritize stronger chicks and may neglect weaker ones. Coots don't build a single nest. They construct multiple platforms in a season for display, eggs and chicks, each with ramps that let young birds move in and out of the water. They also rely on an unusually complex communication system, using over a dozen body signals, adjusting posture, wings, neck feathers, and the white forehead shield to signal intent. From the still surface of Inks Lake, the trail follows the current outward to the Llano River, where clear water runs over granite through one of Texas's most distinct river stretches. The river flows directly over pink and grey granite sitting right at the surface, creating natural pools, ledges and chutes that no engineer planned and no budget could replicate. On calm days, the riverbed is visible at depths that make the water look far shallower than it actually is, a detail that has surprised more than a few confident waders mid-step. The same river that looks perfectly calm can rise without warning. Flash floods fed by storms miles upstream give no signal from the bank, and the water moves faster than expected. Beneath the current, two rock systems meet, the hill country limestone and the older granite of the Llano uplift, colliding underfoot and making this stretch unlike any other river in Texas. The same clear, fast water that draws fishermen also draws predators, and one is already waiting at the bank, barely moving and almost invisible. The green heron doesn't announce itself. Compact, patient, and positioned exactly where the water slows down, it has been watching the river long before anyone noticed it standing there. It hunts from the edges of the water, perching low on branches or reeds with its body tightly folded into the background, waiting for movement to break the surface. From this stillness comes sudden violence. The neck stays coiled in an S shape, then releases in a single explosive motion that closes the distance in a fraction of a second. It's also one of the few birds known to use tools, dropping insects, feathers or sticks onto the surface to draw fish closer before attacking the instant they rise. Visually, it disappears into its surroundings, small, dark and built for concealment rather than visibility, easy to overlook even in plain sight. When threatened, it compresses further, raises a small crest, and freezes so completely that even experienced birders can pass within steps without noticing it is there. Its diet is broad for such a specialised hunter: fish, crayfish, frogs, snakes, insects, worms and small rodents. But larger prey is often drowned before being swallowed. Juveniles look entirely different, streaked pale and brown, giving the impression of a separate species until adult plumage develops over time. Not everything that draws a crowd is quiet and patient. The Salt Lick barbecue pulls people off the highway with something far less subtle: the smell of meat over open fire, long before the sign appears. At the centre, the pit has burned for decades, fuelled by post oak, that gives the meat a flavour no gas grill or smoker has ever matched. Its recipe traces back to a family crossing the country in a wagon train, cooking tough cuts over open fire out of necessity. What began as survival food later became a defining Texas barbecue tradition. Open pavilions and long communal tables replace any formal dining room, with the pit in plain view, placing strangers side by side and quietly encouraging conversation. On peak weekends, the wait tops 2 hours and almost nobody leaves, saying as much about the food as it does about what people will endure and travel for. That's the scene in one image, a fire burning longer than memory, strangers at the same table, and a place that has never been in a hurry. This is Texas Hill Country, a land of hidden wonders and remarkable architectural marvels. Now, if you don't want to miss the most unreal wonders of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, check out this video.